Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am here for my Week 3 LCK overview, analysis, and of course, at the end, my power rankings. This is the first LCK video I am making of the 2022 summer split. If you have not seen that I am back, I am back. I have recently returned to making videos. I have gotten some help. Thank you to the fine people that are helping me make the graphics for these videos now. We can kind of speed the process along. I don't have to do everything on my own. That kind of allows me to, well, make these videos again at all. So, I am back. If you haven't seen the videos that I've put up already on actually every other region that I cover, that's going to be up in the iCard right now. Go ahead and click on that, and you can see the rest of my videos. But here today, we are here to talk about the LCK Week 3. It's going to be exciting. This was a fun week of LCK action, so I don't want to waste too much time to get into it. A little bit of housekeeping first. Up on the screen right about now, you are going to see my power rankings heading into Week 3. I'm not going to be going over all of the Week 1 games and all of the Week 2 games in the same way. Up on the screen right now, you'll see where I power rank the teams after Week 2 going into this Week 3 of games. I'm not going to talk about these power rankings too in depth right now because we will be getting into all 10 teams as we go throughout the video, but just so you guys have an idea of where my head is at for a lot of these teams going into the week, that is up on the screen right now. But without further ado, let's not waste any more time and let's jump right into our first series of the week here. Day 1, Week 3, we kicked it off with Liiv SANDBOX taking on DRX, and Liiv actually picking up a pretty surprising 2-1 win here. DRX was on a roll. They were undefeated up to this point. They had only dropped one game all season long, and SANDBOX actually comes in and is able to beat them, and beat them pretty convincingly here off the back of two really solid Aphelios games from Prince, who has actually been a really huge upgrade to the SANDBOX team. They really struggled to find a consistent bot lane last split in spring, I should say. And I think they found it. Prince has been really good. Kale has finally, I think, settled in. He also had a really good series here. The Aphelios Tahm Kench game in Game 3 was the reason they were able to win this series. So, very, very good look here from SANDBOX. They take Game 1 and Game 3. Game 2 was pretty close. Kind of back and forth. More of a DRX affair, if you will. They tend to, when they win, they don't win as hard as I think some other teams do. But, they end up pulling it out in the end. In this one, they couldn't do it in Game 3. Not a great series here from DRX. There were a couple times that I just felt they got a little outplayed, which is a little surprising against a SANDBOX team that honestly shouldn't be as good as they are. Beryl is going to be my dud of the series here. I'm just a little concerned with his champion pool. He's been alright to start the season, but pulling out the Amumu here, pulling out the Rel. We've seen the Amumu globally. It's a pick I'm really not a huge fan of. I really think you have to be super far ahead for that pick to be really at all worth it in the late game. Engaged supports just aren't generally what you want to do right now. They get pretty hard countered by something like a Tahm Kench. And then, of course, the Rel. The Rel in Game 3, I think, is pretty inexcusable. I don't think Rel is really pickable right now. That's another pick where if you're not, like, Giga ahead, it's just going to be really difficult for me to see a world in which that is making nearly the impact that it needs to. Especially over a pick like Nautilus, which I believe was on the board. I believe it got second rotation banned. So, if you had the opportunity to pick it, I certainly would have went for that because, even Rakan or something like that. Anything else, I just don't think Rel is very viable right now. But a good series from Liiv. Like I said, Prince is my player of the series. He was really phenomenal. He has come into his own and really become one of the better, the better kept secrets in the LCK right now of, I don't think he's getting a lot of hype, but he's really been, pretty good for SANDBOX, kind of the driving force. We will talk about it in, right now. Yes, Dove took Azir top in Game 3 into the Gangplank, and man, did that matchup really, really work out for Dove. I can definitely see where in lane, that could be a really tough thing for Gangplank to at all deal with. And that was really what happened, is Azir just bullied him in lane to the point where both of them are going to scale, but Azir just scaled way harder in those team fights, so it almost neutralized the Gangplank in a way that I don't think we've seen globally from many other picks. So, really interesting idea there from Dove, and I'm glad to be able to pull it off. I'm just a little bit scared to see it in my solo queue games now. I hopefully don't. So, yeah, Liiv looking pretty good. They might actually be better than I'm giving them credit for. Up to this point, I thought they looked like an okay team, right? Like one of those teams that's going to fight for that 6th playoff spot that I think is pretty up for grabs. And DRX is in the top 4. I was always sitting there like, DRX is a Worlds team. The top 4 feel pretty solidified right now. This is a really good win for Liiv. And, you know, DRX definitely has shown some cracks this year. Some things to be concerned about. I'm not going to pull the plug on them just yet or anything like that, but definitely a loss that you don't want to see. And a loss that or a win that you very much do want to see if you're a Sandbox fan. Moving on to our second series here of day 1, we have probably the series that most people are going to be talking about all week long in the LCK, and that was the death of the streak. KDF taking down T1 and ending their undefeated streak here in the LCK for the year of 2022. Very, very sad day here, but a very, very fun series, and of course, it would end to a draft like this from KDF. Let's talk about it. T1 actually takes game 1 in a pretty standard game. Both teams kind of picking relatively standard things other than like the Ornn mid is a little weird, but like, okay, whatever, you know, it didn't do that much. You know, Faker still had a good game on the Azir. And then you move in to game 2 and you pick that Seraphine and things start to change. KDF with a pretty dominant win in game 2. And then game 3, you pull it out. You pull out not only the Ornn mid, you pull out the Seraphine, you add in the Ashe, but guess what? The Ashe isn't farming. This is support Ashe being played by Teddy, and then Hoyt getting the farm on Seraphine with an Ornn in the mid lane. This is an unbelievable comp. You get Mandate Ashe, you get Seraphine, you get the Ornn mid to stop the Lissandra from essentially doing anything, and boom, like, this is a draft. Like, this is honestly phenomenal drafting from KDF. I'm usually not a huge fan of this, like, weird, for the sake of weird stuff. I feel like usually it doesn't have a purpose. This clearly had a purpose, and that's more CC equals win. And that's really what you had, right? You had so much, you already have so much damage from Wukong, right? Wukong is generally going to give you so much damage that it doesn't really matter. Gnar is also going to do a surprising amount of damage when you build him damage. And Gnar in the Gangplank is a pretty good matchup for Keen to get online on. And that's it, really. You have infinite CC from Ornn, Ashe, Seraphine if you land it. And if I also, you know, Wukong knock up, Gnar ultimate, like, it's not like you only have a few bits of CC. Everybody here is really dominant. So a great draft here from KDF, and they are able to take it. Teddy is going to be my player of the series here. He was really good. That Ashe game in game 3 really blew me away. Ashe is one of those champions that is just not particularly strong when it comes to damage in the meta. But if you can land, like, all your shit, like, it's really difficult for people to play against that. You know, especially into melees like Wukong. You hit that arrow and you just get blown up. You're dead immediately. And Teddy didn't miss an arrow. The long-range sniper here this game, Teddy was really, really phenomenal on the Ashe with those ultimates. Hoyt was really good on the Seraphine. Obviously, I told you Keen was phenomenal on that Gnar. Big shout out to Keen. He was very, very close to getting my player of the series here. But at the end of the day, I think Teddy really deserved it with how he played in that game 3. As for T1, this isn't the end of the world. I know it's the end of the undefeated streak, and that sucks. But it's not the end of the world. They still played all right. I think they just got draft gapped a little bit. My dud of the series is going to go to Faker. He was fine, but he was just super out macroed here by Fate in games 2 and 3, really. The Azir pick wasn't working. I know Faker loves his Azir, but it wasn't working. They weren't getting the time to be able to scale that up, and he needed something that was a little bit more proactive into the Ornn, something that was going to help the team a little bit more. And so he goes through the Lissandra in game 3, but, like, who are you going to click on as Lissandra here? You have one target, or really two if the Gnar is doing damage. You have Gnar and Wukong to click on and just, like, hope and pray, and you're not going to be able to kill them while they're in ult. Like, that's almost more of a problem. And so the Lissandra pick just wasn't able to do much. The Azir pick never really got online. So Faker was kind of my dud of the series here, although you could give it to a few people. I think Owner ran it a little bit in the last game there, towards the end, at least on the Lee Sin. And his game 1 on the Xin Zhao. I don't like the Xin Zhao pick. And then, of course, Guma and Keria pretty much got outplayed here by Teddy and Hoyt, but it's hard to talk about how much of that is, like, their fault, because they didn't really make mistakes. They just kind of got outscaled by the CC-heavy comp and weren't able to team fight out of it. So Overall, not like the end of the world for T1. Really, I think this was KDF being proactive, being smart, being a good team, rather than T1 just being bad. And so that's almost more exciting for me to see. I'm not going to pull the plug or anything on T1 being the best team in the LCK because of this. But KDF looking really, really good here. Definitely another one of those teams, you know, add into the DRX, the SANDBOX, the KT Rolster, whatever you want to throw in there, that is going to be fighting for one of those lower playoff spots that can only go to so many teams. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how their season plays out. But after running it down for a lot of the early part, it is crazy to see them be the ones to end T1's streak. Moving on to our second day of Week 3 LCK action, we kicked it off with Fredit BRION taking on Hanwha Liiv Esports here. HLE picking up the 2-1 win. It was alright. This was an alright series. Certainly some misplays from BRION, especially in that Game 3, but overall, you know, a good win for Hanwha. This does seem to be a little bit of a matchup of the worst two teams in the league. And those are sometimes just as fun as the top two matchups in the league. This one, unfortunately, I'm not sure if it quite lived up to that hype. One thing to note before we jump in here, I believe it's only one major substitution. Raptor coming in here for Umti on Fredit BRION. Umti has just been nothing. We saw Raptor a little bit in Spring Split, but, you know, we'll see how much time he gets here in Summer. HLE looked good. Karis especially, I think, actually had a pretty good series here. This is someone who's been very up and down for this HLE team. He's not had a particularly good 2022 in general, but he comes in here. I know I was pretty hyped up on him coming in at the beginning of 2022, coming in spring for this team. He was kind of the one member of this team I was a little excited about, but he's been in and he's been all right. You know, early this year he was not good. He was good in this series though. The Azir in Game 3. Really, really important. I really like the build on this Azir, and this is kind of the build I would typically recommend you go on Azir. You know, the Liandry's more into the burn, right? Rather than the, you know, just like AFK running it with Nashers, right? I kind of like this build a little bit more. I mean, again, just personal opinion. I think both builds are good, but, you know, this one is just a little bit more my style. And then I also think Samdi started playing well towards the end there on the Jinx. He had a pretty good Game 3 on the Jinx. Him and Vista are finally starting to develop some level of chemistry together. Vista just doesn't have a very good champion pool, I think, for this meta. You see him still pulling out the things like the Yuumi and the Thresh. Thresh has been nerfed into the ground so much that I'm not even sure he's playable at a pro level right now. His CC duration is just very low. His cooldowns are so long that it's very difficult to convince me that he is ever going to be like a truly optimal pick with something like Nautilus up. But at the same time, you know, I get it. Like, Thresh still does so much that Lantern is always going to be something that really only Thresh has. And he still has a lot of CC, right? The Flay, the Hook, it's still there. The ult, it's all still there. It's just a little bit less good right now than I think it's been before. But yeah, a good series here from Hanwha Liiv. Not really much else to talk about outside of that. Everybody was just kind of fine. Dudu played well on the Jackson Game 3. That's another thing to note. As for Bro, meh. They look meh. They look bad. This is a team that I think really shocked a lot of people with how they played towards the back half of Spring. They were just really competitive, I think, throughout all of Spring. Even in their losses, they never got blown out. And that was a good sight to see. A lot of that was due to how well Lava was playing in the mid lane, and that's just not carried over to Summer. They've pretty easily been the worst team in Summer. This is actually, their Game 1 win here is actually their first win of Summer, period. And for that to come in their 5th series is just not good. Morgan's gonna get my dud of the series here. He had some Camille engages in that Game 3 where you are scratching your head. You are very much scratching your head. This felt very much like the Morgan of old, and not so much the Morgan that we got in Spring, who looked like an improved player. This was not a good series for Morgan at all, so he's going to get my dud of the series here. Although, a lot of people are going to be pointing to Henna in that Game 3 on the Aphelios, taking a classic page out of the LPL's book, playing Gale Force Aphelios, Gale forcing in to 5 members of the team in the final fight and just getting completely blown up, losing the game essentially for the team. The reason I don't want to give him dud of the series is he actually played really well outside of that. He was a big reason they won that Game 1 there on the Zeri, and he actually had a pretty good game outside of that Gale Force in both Games 2 and 3. So it's really hard for me to give him dud of the series when he played really well, except for that one pretty tremendous misplay towards the end of that game 3 that basically cost Bro the game. Just generally not a good decision. But yeah, as for the outlooks of these teams, Fredit BRION is bad. They're probably the worst team in the LCK, which is sucky to say because that's a huge regression from where they were at just, 3 months ago. And then as for Hanwha, they're not much better. I really don't think so. This really feels like the 9 and 10 teams playing against each other. So, Hanwha's going to be happy to pick up a win here, but I'm not sure if it really actively, reflects a change of the guard for either of these teams, if you will. Jumping into our second series here of day 2, we had NS RedForce taking on Gen.G. A really, really decisive win here for Gen.G. Happy for them. They look phenomenal to start this year. I think you could make a real case that they look like the best team in the LCK. Obviously, them and T1 are going to fight neck and neck for that number 1 spot. But Gen.G looks really, really good here. Let's talk about it. Ruler. Ruler is back, baby. I've been pretty steadfast on my thoughts that Ruler is still the best AD carry in the LCK. I know that, there's a lot of hype players that you could put above him in terms of maybe recent success. Gumayushi, I think, has a lot of fans, right? And, Dekdom, I think, has been playing better and better. But for me, Ruler's consistency is just unmatched in terms of how well he has played for this Gen.G team. And he shows why I am pretty justified in saying that in this series where he was just clearly the best player on the Rift. Game 1 on the Lucian was just kind of a takeover game, one lane really hard, and then was able to snowball that out of control, as you can do with Lucian if you win. And then Game 2 on the Ashe, we saw Ashe earlier in the week, of course playing a more supportive role. This one was getting farm with Renata, and we were still able to see a kind of a takeover kind of game. This was not Mandate Ashe, this was Crit Ashe, this was Shield Bow, Ginsu's, Runan's Ashe, right? Like, your traditional AD carry Ashe, and it was really effective. That's a pick I think is just generally not good right now, and Ruler was still able to pretty much dominate on it. Did a lot of damage in that game, so Ruler really showing why I think he's justified in being called the best AD carry in the LCK, and one of the best in the world. But that's not to say nobody else on this team played well. Lehen's really helped him out. Lehen's had a really, really good series here. He's been much more consistent on this Gen.G team than I think he has ever been in his career. It's really, really good to see you finally put him around a team that is less feast or famine, less boom or bust. And I think he really starts to settle in and kind of adopt that mentality of being a little bit more consistent rather than having these huge ups and these huge downs. Chovy wasn't a huge factor in this series. You have the Yone game in Game 1, the Yone game, and I don't love the Yone build, but whatever. And then you put him on the Karma in Game 2 because, sure, why not? Like, screw it. You've got Wukong. You have an Ashe AD carry, like, why not? Why not put him on a Karma in Game 2? So, him on a support, it's kind of funny, but he looked good on it. And then Peanut finally gets his Poppy pick. I know that's one of his classic favorite picks, so it's good to see him be able to get that. Probably the pick he is most comfortable on, or at least that's what he's shown he's most comfortable on, so good for him to get that. For Doran, he looked alright. You hope he can look a little bit better in the upcoming weeks. His laning phase on the Gnar was a little questionable in Dakana, but still he won it, so how much can you say? Yeah, Gen.G just looking overall super cohesive, super good. Really not a lot of flaws to talk about on that team. As for Nongshim, they have flaws, but I think a lot of them are pretty easy to point out. I don't know why Effort is still playing. And I mean that in the least flame way possible of Effort was really bad in spring, and then he got benched for Peter, who came in, and Peter was actually pretty good for this team. This team was certainly better with Peter. And then he had like 1 or 2 bad games. They benched him for Effort again, and Peter has never been back in. Effort's not looked any better than he did when he was at his worst in spring. He is clearly the worst player on this team. He's probably been the worst player in the LCK so far this year. He's my dud of the game here, and a dud of the series. He was just bad again. There's really nothing else to say. You play the Nami to take it away from the Lucian Nami lane. Okay, you put that with Zeri, and the Nami's like useless. It's not going to do anything. You're playing into Lucian Yuumi. What is the Nami going to do here to help the Zeri? Nothing. You play the Sen and Tom Kench, and you just die over and over and over and over again on the TK. It's like, okay, well, what exactly are you doing? Not a great series here from Effort. Ghost hasn't been much better. He's really taken a step back in summer so far. This bot lane's not been good. The top side of the map really hasn't shown a lot either. Kana has always kind of been meh on this Nongshim team. Dread is pretty up and down, I think, generally speaking. BDD, I think, has been consistently okay, but it's not like he has these carry performances where this team is struggling and BDD kind of gets them out of it. He's just been a good player surrounded by 4 players who are throwing the game. And that's not a good look for Nongshim. Hopefully they can turn it around. This is a team that, quite frankly, needs to be in playoffs for them to, make all of this worth it. This roster should be a playoff team. And if they're not, that sucks for them. But they certainly don't look it right now. But yeah, good for Gen.G. They dominated this one. They continued their streak of being pretty dominant, not really dropping any games. They've dropped 1 game all year long, or all split long, so just a general good start here for Gen.G. They look phenomenal. Nongshim has a lot of questions that they have to answer to get on the board, but right now, we talked about that cluster of teams looking for 5 and 6. I'm not even sure they're in that cluster right now. That's how not consistent they've been. Hopefully they can figure it out soon, though. Moving on to day 3 action now in the LCK. We had KT Rolster taking on DAMWON Kia. A pretty easy 2-0 win here for DAMWON. They were never really out of control. They looked like the better team. Pretty much top to support here. They look like they just kind of outclassed KT. Which, you would expect to happen. This DAMWON roster's a little bit of a tough start, but really, again, I think very similar to how FPX had it in the LPL. They've had a really tough schedule. They've had to play both T1 and Gen.G already. So, yeah, them being 2-2 going into this, I don't think is nearly as panic button as you would think it would be. Obviously, you bring Nuguri back in here on the top lane. I didn't get to talk about the changes, but him coming back here to DAMWON makes this team genuinely terrifying. I still think he's probably the best top laner in the world. We will end up having to see that, though. One of my favorite top laners in the world, he gapped pretty hard in this series, because I am a huge Rascal fan, as I think a lot of people know, but he gapped Rascal pretty hard in this one. Nuguri had a really good series. He's not my player of the series, though. That is going to go to Canyon in the jungle, who, again, just was phenomenal. He was really, really good. He's just been really good all year long. Him and Showmaker have felt like they've been 2v8ing a lot of these games for DAMWON, even though Dectum and Kellen have good games here and there. Canyon and Showmaker are just, on a different level when it comes to how good this DAMWON team can be, and, the reason that they are a top team and not just a good team, right? Canyon looked good in this one. His game 1 on the Talia was good, but really, he gets player of the series for his game 2 on the Viego, where he just essentially, he got super fed, was able to completely take over that late game. He had that pick off on aiming. Aiming was actually having a pretty good game here on the Jinx, and in a couple more minutes, I think this game could have been really difficult, but Canyon, pretty much with the perfect, anti-vision, staying out of, knowledge for KT Rolster. No one does that in the world better than Canyon, and he did that, was able to pick off aiming on his way to the Baron pit, and the game was essentially over from there, because all the gold was on that Jinx, so really, really well played from Canyon in that game 2. And Showmaker had a phenomenal game 1 on the Lissandra. This is probably the most dominant Lissandra game that I've seen in 2022 so far. I think Lissandra's not really a pick that you expect to be like, oh, this is winning the team fight by itself. But Showmaker has that kind of power, as we know. So, yeah, this was a really good series, I think, from the duo of them. And then also from Nuguri. I think, like I said, Nuguri was really good. Dectum and Kellen were fine. They didn't really have to do too much. Again, we see more Ashe here. I'm not sure if that's going to be something we continue to see. I still don't think it's that strong, but, if we continue to see it, sure, it's good for CC if you have damage elsewhere. This team, I think, was a little overloaded on AP damage. Could have been really easy for someone like an Ornn or a Wukong to itemize against that. I just don't think they did in the way that you would have wanted them to. Obviously, Wukong building that Maw, but outside of that, really, that's all you had. So, yeah, just generally not great from KT Rolster. They were just outplayed. It's really hard to talk about it here. Cuz and Rascal got just gapped, I think, in this series. Rascal's my dud of the series. He was gapped pretty hard by Nuguri, and that's sad to see because, like I said, go back to the history of this channel. Rascal's one of my players, the players that I'm higher than everybody else on. I think Rascal is one of the best top laners in the world, And in this one, he wasn't, unfortunately. He hasn't been super consistent to start off summer. Hopefully he can turn that around. He hasn't been great, but we all know he has the skill to do that. The solo kill king up in the top lane, still a pretty good player. And then Cuz just wasn't as good as Canyon. There's really nothing else to say. Cuz has been fine all year long, but you know, at the end of the day, he's a mid-tier jungler in the LCK. Sometimes he's just going to get outclassed. I think very similar to like a Dread or like what we thought LM was before we realized LM actually isn't that good either. No flame. But yeah, it really, if you want to look at positives for KT, aiming played that second game really well on the Jinx, was able to get a lot of gold onto him, and he was the reason they were in that game towards the end. If he doesn't get picked off by Canyon, which honestly really wasn't his fault, he took the right path to the Baron pit. Canyon just was better. And if he doesn't get picked off there, it could be really interesting, but I should say Vikla is subbing in here for Arya. Arya has been really rough to watch so far in 2022. I definitely saw that one coming at the beginning of the year. Just was not sold on him being someone that could come in and be like a difference maker on this LCK team. Vikla coming in, I don't know if he's going to be better or if he's going to be worse. He didn't really do anything in this game. His Corki got outranged by Zeri. That champ is stupid. But, yeah, you know, we'll see. I'll give him time. You know, if he can continue to play well, then great. If he can't, they still have Arya, so it'll be interesting. But, yeah, really, if you're looking at the outlooks of these two teams, KT is just like a meh tier team. I actually think of them very similarly to how I think of Nongshim right now, where it's just like, yeah, they're alright, I guess. Not great, not bad. They're just alright. Maybe they're a playoff team if things start to click, but I don't know. I don't know if they have the talent to really compete with the top end of LCK teams. As for DAMWON, they do, and they are. This is a top 3 to 4 team in the league, depending on how you view DRX, and they're going to stay there. You would have liked to see them be a little bit more proactive against the better teams, Gen.G and T1, but they have time, and Nuguri just rejoined. These are some of his first pro games back. If this team can get even more synergy and start to click a little bit more, maybe he becomes that force in the top lane that we know he can be. This team really could be like a world champion contender when the World Championships roll around. Moving on to our second series here of Day 3, we had T1 taking on DRX, a battle of two teams that I think a lot of people want to see on the world's stage, and T1 definitely gets the better of them in this one, as they did for most of spring as well. T1 is just the better team. There's really not much else to talk about here. DRX is good, but they definitely have flaws. They definitely have things that they need to improve on if they really want to become like one of the best teams in the world. T1's there. Like, their weaknesses are minor at the very least. Like, you could argue that their worst player this year has been Faker, and it's not like Faker's not a top 2 to 3 mid laner in the LCK. That's just how good this team has been, and they showed that in this series. They were phenomenal. My player of the series is going to go to Owner here in the jungle. He had 2 back-to-back games where it was just like, the pacing of this team is nearly perfect. The map control is unbelievable. Wow, Gumayushi's so good. Have to include that in there. Rest in peace, Deft, for getting clapped in this one. But yeah, not a good series here from DRX. Just in general, it was kind of tough to pick a dud of the series here, because I actually think most of them had moments of being good and moments of being bad. For me, at the end of the day, Kingen was just so useless that he's going to get the dud of the series here. DRX losing and Kingen getting the dud of the series, a wonderful combo. He has gotten a lot better over the year. It's just been kind of rough. Like, they've got 4 really, really, really good players on this team, and then Kingen's just kind of fine. And so when they lose, it's usually like he just gets a little bit outclassed, which he did in this one by Zeus. Let's not go over that, but yeah, the Gnar game was meh. The Gwen game, he was like irrelevant, completely irrelevant. You could give this to Deft as well, but that's really more of the pick than it is, I think, the player. Deft didn't play particularly well in this series, but the Kalista into Senna matchup is just really, really bad for Kalista. It's something I certainly wouldn't pick over and over again. I'm still not a huge fan of the Amumu pick in Game 1. Beryl loves this pick. He played it a ton in spring, and he's been playing it in summer as well. I just don't like it. Like, I'm not going to harp on it too much. I've talked about it already in this video, but I'm just not a huge fan of the Amumu support pick right now. Overall, I just think DRX got draft gapped by T1, which is like a crazy phrase to say, but T1's actually had quite a few good drafts in summer so far. Maybe they're finally turning a new leaf and becoming the drafting team that we all know that they can be. And if they can learn to draft with as good as these players are, they're going to be the world champion in no time. So, yeah, a really good series here from T1 just in general. Everybody on the team playing well, most specifically Owner and Gumayushi having really, really good series. You could give this to Guma if you really wanted to. I just think it felt more of the matchup than it did Guma just being like that much better. Whereas Owner, I think, showed a lot more like outplay potential here on the Lee Sin and the Viego, but really, both played really well. The entire team played well. Keria had a great series here. Really good game, too, here on the Seraphine. Like I said, Faker and Zeus were good. Zeus kind of outclassing King in the top lane. And then Faker playing, Corki and the unkillable Swain in the late game here. You had a really funny interaction with Swain getting poppy ulted in that game, too. I highly recommend you find that clip if you haven't seen it. Very, very funny. But, yeah, just a fun series here. T1 is one of the best teams in the world. There's really not much to talk about. DRX has some question marks. Obviously, losing to T1 isn't like an end-of-the-world type of thing, but it's definitely something to note. Losing to SANDBOX earlier in the week, losing to T1 here, not the look that you necessarily want if you want to be a top team. So yeah, going from undefeated to 0-2 week, not the best look here from DRX, but obviously we all know they have the talent to turn that around. They showed that in spring when they started off really, really terribly at the beginning of spring and then figured it out. Were able to become one of the better teams in the LCK by the end of that year, and hopefully they can do that again in summer. Just, this one was not an example of how to do that. This was all T1 all the time. Moving on to day 4 here, we kicked day 4 off with a matchup between Liiv SANDBOX and Fredit BRION here. A 2-0 win for SANDBOX. They have a 2-0 week here. Jump up to 4-2. This team actually might be good. Question mark? Not that beating Bro right now is that much of an accomplishment because this team is just looking lost in general, looking completely TSM lost. Oh, I'm sorry, IMT lost. Yeah, just not looking good at all. Liiv SANDBOX is looking good. This team has found the secret sauce this week. They looked good just in general. I think their young players have really started to step up, is really what it feels like to me. Most notably, Prince. Prince has really become a really, really, like, secret threat here in the LCK. He's slowly becoming one of the better AD carries in the region. Like, actually, there's a reason that I think a lot of teams really wanted him. This guy used to be on DAMWON, FPX. He was going to be on Victory 5. Like, there were a lot of teams that were really interested in Prince, and he's showing why so far this year. But he isn't my player of the series. My player of the series is going to go to Closer in the mid lane, someone who I've been pretty hard on this channel. Closer had a lot of hype coming over here to SANDBOX as somebody who, he had been taking time off of Faker when he was on T1 and, splitting time, and he looked really, really good in his time there, but I actually thought he had a pretty rough spring. Certainly not up to the standard that we expected him to, and I kind of just attributed that to like, oh, maybe he just wasn't as good as we thought he was, because you look at a lot of these T1 players that end up leaving the system, end up leaving, the players that are around them, the world-class players that are around them all the time, and they don't play that same level that they do when they're on that team. I just assumed Closer was going to be one of them, and, he had a good series here. He's starting to prove me wrong a little bit. He's been a lot better in summer, but still not great, but a lot better. Krakow had another really good series here. This is someone who had a really great 2021, and really regressed so far in 2022. Hopefully he can get back to the form that everybody knows he can get at. Dove has, become a better top laner as the season went on. He was really rough at first, obviously transitioning from the mid lane. He was definitely a rough at the top lane at first. He was getting a little outclassed by most other top laners, but he settled into his role, his tank duty role that he's off and on for this Liiv SANDBOX team, and he started to play well. So Liiv SANDBOX really starting to come together as that team, I think. As for Fredit BRION, they're trying everything. They're throwing everything at the wall just to see if they can get any sort of wins here, and they can't. They start 0-6, 1-12, a really rough start for Fredit BRION. Sword comes in for Morgan. Comes back in for Raptor. That doesn't matter. A Sword, it might not even be better than Morgan. I feel bad for He tried in the series. He was actually really good in Game 1 here on the Viego. Just wasn't enough to propel them to a win here, but, obviously you see him crying on the stage after. This stuff is really intense. being a pro player, like having that desire to win can be so passionate, and to see that on the stage, you hope this team can get it together. They just don't seem to have it right now. Whatever they had in spring as that plucky underdog that was even able to like push DAMWON, they certainly don't have that right now, and hopefully they can get it back, but it really isn't there right now. My dud of the series is going to go to Lava in the mid lane. This was the guy who I think they played all through a lot in Spring Split, and he has very much disappointed at the beginning of summer. He's arguably been their worst player, or one of their worst players, and if he can't be kind of carrying the games in a sense, they're gonna have a tough time winning, which we've seen. When he plays like this, they're gonna have a tough time winning. He was not particularly good. He didn't accomplish hardly anything in the series. The LeBlanc pick, I think, is just, it's fine. It's whatever. Swain, I think, is a good pick, but into Sylas, like, Sylas makes that pick even more scary, right? Because you could steal Swain ult, and you already have the inbuilt healing of Sylas. That's terrifying to deal with, so generally, a really fun comp here from Liiv SANDBOX, but Fredit BRION, hopefully they can figure it out and get it together. Right now, they're just completely in shambles, completely in pieces. They're clearly the worst team in the LCK, and they have a lot to figure out. And as for SANDBOX, they are on the up and up. This is a team that very much could be in that contention for even as high as, like, 4th right now. Like, if you really want to put them that high in your power rankings, like, they look really good, and they just beat DRX pretty handily. So, yeah, honestly, Liiv SANDBOX looking really, really good. Hopefully they can continue this throughout the season. Moving on to the second series here of day 4, we had Gen.G taking on the Kwangdong Freecs, KDF. Gen.G is the better team. What else can I say? KDF is not on the level that is consistently going to be able to beat a Gen.G, T1. I know they beat him earlier in the week, but obviously the Freecs magic against T1 lives on forever, but Gen.G with the clean 2-0 here, it really wasn't ever that close. Gen.G was just the better team pretty much from minute 1, off the back of having the most disgusting jungle mid duo in the world, Peanut and Chovy. How is it allowed that these two are allowed to play on the same team? They have been so good this year. I'm really, really hoping that this team can put it together and win an LCK title. Chovy getting his first LCK title, Ruler getting his first LCK title. Yeah, Ruler hasn't won the LCK. I know that's like crazy to believe, but Gen.G's never won the LCK. I don't believe. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section below, but to my knowledge, I don't think Ruler has ever won the LCK. And then obviously Peanut has, but it's been a while. Like, this is just an easy team to root for, I think, in terms of players. Peanut is going to be my player of the series here. You could give this to Chovy. Really, I mean, Peanut in the game 1 on the Poppy just took over the map. There was absolutely nothing that Kwangdong could do into that. And then Chovy in the game 2 on that Sylas, that Gnar ult, once he stole it, like, holy crap, that 4-man that just, like, ended the game. That was pretty disgusting. One of the best plays there. You could give this to either of them. I gave it to Peanut because I thought he was more fun to watch. But you could give this to Chovy. He had that giant Sylas play. He was awesome on that Sylas in game 2. Ruler also plays really well here. They picked Gash in game 2, something that we know Ruler can play. I can't believe that's become a power pick. And in general, Gen.G just looks like the best team in Korea. There's really not much else to say. For KDF, like, you're going to be a little disappointed that you beat T1 and then come back and really just get obliterated by Gen.G, but, not the best look. The draft, I think, is really where this goes really wrong. I'm very much not a fan of this Jhin pick in game 2. I don't think Jhin is, like, super playable right now. Obviously, you want Teddy on, like, a control, ADC, a more passive, supportive ADC, because you had him on the Ashe earlier in the week. You have him on the Jhin here. I just don't get why. Teddy's like one of your better hyper carry players. Maybe get him on something that can be a little more proactive. You're putting a lot of pressure here on Hoyt to play the Ashe and to play the Rakan and to be a little bit more proactive with those engages. And Hoyt has shown that he's just not that kind of player, or at least he's not the kind of player that Teddy is, right? Not to say that Hoyt's an awful player, just that if I have to pick which one I would rather be proactive in the lane, I'd much rather that be Teddy. And I get it. If Seraphine gets banned away from them, they look pretty tragic, which is a tough thing to come to grips with because obviously, you don't want a team to have to rely on one pick, but they look much better with that champion than they do without that champion. But Keen is going to get my dud of the series here. He did nothing in this series. He got clapped on Ornn in game 1, was really, really useless in that one. And then he was pretty useless in game 2 as well on the Gnar. Honestly, the most important Gnar thing that happened in that game, like I said, was Sylas using Gnar ult to basically end the game. So Yeah, just not a good series from KDF overall. It's not that Keen played particularly awful. I think everybody on this team just wasn't good. Elm had some fight, which is interesting to say on the Viego, because Elm has kind of been the weak spot of this team, I think, for most of 2022, but he was okay in this one, was at least trying to make plays. Outside of that, this KDF team had really nothing. As for outlooks, KDF's still in that cluster, right? The cluster of Nongshim, the cluster of Liiv SANDBOX, DRX, KT Rolster, all these other teams of like who are going to be the teams that solidify their spot in the playoffs out of those teams. KDF is kind of in that group. Losing to Gen.G is not the end of the world here, but obviously you would like to at least see them put up a little bit more of a fight. As for Gen.G, it's going to be really hard to convince anybody right now that they're not the best team in the LCK. Obviously, T1 and Gen.G are like the two best. It's just about where you want to put them. And, they're a Worlds contender. They're a Worlds Final, Worlds Champion contender. There's really not much else to say. They are, if Peanut and Chovy and Ruler can play like this, there's absolutely nothing that any team in the world is going to be able to do to stop them. That's going to bring us to our 5th and final day of Week 3 LCK action. We kicked that one off with DAMWON Kia taking on NS RedForce. A DAMWON win, 2-0. Both games not so close off the back of an incredibly strong Zeri, an incredibly strong Zeri, and incredibly strong Zeri. This pick dominated this series. It was really not even close for minute 1. A couple really interesting picks here from Nongshim that we'll get into. Dektum's my player of the series. I really shouldn't have to explain that too much. He was super dominant in this one. They had absolutely no answer for that Zeri pick, especially in Game 2 when they picked the Yuumi away, so they can't even go Twitch Yuumi, which globally, I think is actually a really good pick into Zeri. Twitch Yuumi outscales it for the most part, but you have to be good enough to pull that off. Nongshim wasn't in Game 1, and they just got kind of clapped because of it. Dektum and Kellen have really started to come together in summer. They were fine in spring. They had their ups and their downs, but really I think this was Canyon and Showmaker's team in spring more than anything. This is the first sign of like, oh wow, like this could be like a big actual like 5-headed monster if everything comes together with Nuguri coming in the top lane. And if this bot lane can really get on the same page and be something that they can actively play around, like that's going to open up the map so much for this DAMWON team. So yeah, great series from that bot lane. Showmaker also played really well here. I'll get to BDD in a minute, but when you blind pick Azir and you just get to pick with Corki up, you just get to pick Corki into it and just completely outpoke the Azir, do almost nothing into it the entire game. Like, I don't really get the point of that, but sure, like, shout out Showmaker. He was able to play Corki into Azir and he played it right. And then everybody else on the team was fine. Like, Nuguri and Canyon didn't have to take over the game. They were good enough, right? Like, this bot lane got so far ahead, and Showmaker was able to kind of help in those team fights that DAMWON was able to pick up an easy win. As for Nongshim, this team just has so many question marks. I'm not really sure how bad Peter is in scrims, but it's gotta be pretty bad, right? Like, at this point, what do you even really lose from just saying, like, okay, we're just gonna play Peter? Because Effort has been the worst player in the LCK, and it's not even that particularly close. He just hasn't been able to sustain himself at this level. He's just not good enough. Peter played in Game 1, and yeah, they didn't win, but they didn't, like, hard lose. Yeah, they had the counter matchup, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You go right back to Effort in Game 2. Not only that, you go Seraphine Senna, and you give Ghost, who is one of the better Senna players in the world, in my opinion, Seraphine. You don't even give him Senna in the lane. I don't get it. Like, I don't get it. It's such a confusing system to me. You have BDD blind picking Azir for like the 7th time this season and getting counterpicked with Corki, getting destroyed in lane, while also building Bork on, and then, what was it, Sunfire on Yone? It's just like, what is going on? I don't get what this team's trying to do. They look completely lost, completely hopeless. The dud of the series is Kana in the top lane, because, again, he didn't do anything. He picks Mordekaiser in Game 2 and just is so useless on that pick. If it could be Effort, it would be. He had the worst game of anybody here on the Senna in Game 2, but I can't give dud of the series to somebody who only played in one of the games. So it's going to go to Kana in the top lane. You could give it to BDD, but mostly I think the problems with BDD were his build. Dread just had no map pressure. It wasn't even really his fault. Just what are you going to do in this series? Nongshim looks completely lost right now. Like, I don't know if I believe in this team as a playoff team if they just continue to run it like this. They look bad. I know it's DAMWON, and I know DAMWON's a really good team, but man, this is just, it's an unmitigated disaster to watch this team play right now, unfortunately. So, yeah, as for the outlooks, Nongshim looks bad. Like, they started the year and they looked pretty good, and they've just regressed so much in this week. They were the worst team in the LCK this week, maybe other than Bro. But outside of that, I don't know if there was a worse team in LCK this week. Just not good from Nongshim. As for DAMWON, you're going to be really excited with this dominant win here. You're really going to be excited with Dekdom playing so well. Hopefully they can keep that up. Like I said, if this team becomes like 5 players who are all top of their roles, like they're going to be right up there with T1 and with Gen.G for the best team in the LCK as a World's Finals contender. But we're going to have to see a little bit more consistency out of this bot lane before I believe that to be like just the case, generally speaking. That brings us to our final series here of Week 3 LCK action. That was KT Rolster taking on Hanwha Liiv Esports. KT, a very clean 2-0 win for KT Rolster. Those don't happen, but they did it. They did it in this one. Yeah, they looked really, really good. I actually think this entire team played really clean. They were dominant in both games, especially that game 2. An incredibly dominant game from KT there. They were just clearly the better team. Hanwha is just not very good, but KT looking really good. Rascal is going to be my player of the series here. He was my dud of the series earlier in the week, and he's my player of the series here. When Rascal wins, he wins hard, and he won in this series on the Gwen. His game 1 was disgusting to watch. He just kind of manhandled Dudu in that lane for both games, really, but especially in that game 1. Aiming and Life also played really well in the bottom lane. Aiming is one of those players, I've talked about this a lot. Aiming plays really well from ahead. If he can get a lead, he does a good job of maintaining that lead. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He's just not the most proactive player in the world, and he can sometimes get into a little bit of sticky situations when it almost just seems like he's on autopilot sometimes, but he was good in this series. Life was also really good in the series. Rascal and Life I thought were the 2 powerhouses of this KT roster in spring. And when they win, it definitely seems to be off the back of those 2 playing really well. Not to say that Cousin Vikla weren't also great, just that I don't think they were as important in these wins. But for Hanwha, they're not a good team. There's really not much else to say. Their win against Fredit BRION should not be taken lightly earlier in the week because, again, Bro is a complete unmitigated disaster, and Hanwha is not that much better than them. Dudu's going to be my dud of the series here, completely outclassed in the top lane by Rascal. Nobody on this team looked particularly good. Samd and Vista are just nothing in the bottom lane. Karis runs it sometimes. He just has these games where he's like really bad, and that's what he was on the Azir in game 2. Just really, really bad. Not that anybody else was that much better in game 2. I think Dudu had their only kill on the Gnar in game 2. Just not a great series here from Hanwha, just completely outclassed. I don't really have much to say about this. It's really just KT was the better team. They should be the better team. Vikla does look like a little bit of a macro improvement in the mid lane to Arya. I'm not sure if that's just circumstance. Obviously, KT's playing worse teams now than they did when Arya was in, but, I'm all in for giving Vikla a little bit more time to show that he is the guy in the mid lane for this KT Rolster team. And then Hanwha Life's got to figure something out. Like, this team sucks. They wanted to go with youth, but also they've got Samd and Vista as their bot lane. Dudu's not exactly youth in the top lane. It's really just Karis that you're looking at as like a rookie on this team, and they're not good. So I'm not exactly sure what you're going for here with Hanwha, but they're not good. They're not young. They're not really building towards anything. This Hanwha team just doesn't give me a lot of confidence for anything. Like, I don't really know what the plan is for this organization, but yeah, a good series win for KT. They're going to be happy about this. They're going to be happy to end the week on such a high note. They've had a rough start to summer, but obviously they're kind of in that cluster as well of teams I was talking about, the KDFs, the DRXs, the SANDBOXes, etc. Of, if things go red, I could definitely see them being like a low half playoff team, but that they're going to have to be a little bit more consistent, and they're going to have to beat teams that aren't Hanwha Life for me to start believing that. That is going to do it for my Week 3 LCK overview and analysis of all of the games played in all 5 days. Up on your screen right now, you are going to be seeing the current LCK standings. 1 to 10. You are also going to be seeing my personal power ranking number next to it so you can kind of compare how I think these teams stack up in comparison to their record. Next to that, you're going to be seeing how that has changed from the previous week to this one. Not many changes this week. Let's go over the biggest risers and followers. There's really only one faller this week, and that's Nongshim, dropping from 6 to 8. They had an awful week, and they have so much that they need to prove to me in order for me to believe that they are in that cluster of like 5 to 7, teams that are competing for playoff spots. Right now, until they figure it out, they're not a playoff team, and they don't look like they're going to be a playoff team, which is really sucky to say, because again, this roster has so much potential, but they've just been so lackluster so far this split. That means that both KT and KDF jump up to 6 and 7, respectively. KDF, I think, looking a little bit better than KT, not by much, but just a little bit. That win over T1 definitely helps, but, the top 5 not changing at all. Some people are going to want Gen.G over T1 because they lost, but I'm going to need to see Gen.G beat T1 before I say that Gen.G is better than T1. They haven't been able to do it all year long. If they can do it, then I'll buy in, but I have to see it. We're going to be getting that matchup at the beginning of next week, so that'll be really exciting and fun to watch. But as for my player of the week, that is going to go to Ruler on Gen.G. He was he was the best player in the LCK this week. He was really phenomenal. He's been good all year long, but this was probably his best week of 2022. Really good week from Ruler. And my dud of the week, no surprise with how I talk, should go to Effort on Nongshim. I actually gave it to him in week 1 for the LCK as well. He's going to get it in week 3 here. So not a good year for Effort. He has continued to be a huge weak spot on this Nongshim team. I think it is just time they pull the plug and go with Peter for the rest of the year. He can't be any worse. So yes, that is going to be my week 3 overview and analysis. If you guys enjoyed, please go ahead and leave a like and let me know how you like the new format, the new graphics, the new standings page, everything down in the comment section below, who your, player of the week, dud of the week, team of the week, etc. was. Love to hear from you guys. I love to have those conversations in the comment section below. But with that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.